As sports history fans, we often reminisce about the legends. Willis Reed limping onto the NBA Finals court, Kurt Schilling's bloody sock, Kerry Strug's courageous dismount, and so many more. These moments often define sports history. But what about the countless injuries that did not become legends, or careers that were derailed due to inadequate care? That's where this episode's sponsor comes in. Introducing to you, ILP Sports Consultants, your trusted sports injury partner, available 24/7. Brian Maelli at ILP Sports Consultants has over 20 years of experience in the orthopedic and sports medicine industry, and he has worked with athletes across the gamut, from youth to amateurs, professionals, in almost every sport played in the United States of America, accommodating athletes at every stage of their career. This adaptability ensures that ILP services are perfectly tailored to your skill level, no matter where you are in your athletic journey. With ILP, you are in control. Choose the steps that matter most to you. Diagnosis, treatment plan, recovery, or the whole journey. ILP services are tailored to your unique needs. Rushing for care is a common pitfall, leading to future problems. ILP Sports Consultants helps you make the right decisions, ensuring that you receive timely and safe care. And here's a bonus. Brian hosts the Injured List podcast, sharing insights and athlete stories you won't want to miss. Whether you're a concerned parent or grandparent, or an athlete yourself seeking guidance, ILP Sports Consultants is your beacon of hope in sports injury management. Visit ilpsports.com today. That's the letters ilpsports.com. ILP Sports Consultants, where your well-being is the priority and your recovery is the mission. Choose ILP Sports Consultants for a healthier sports journey, helping you get back in the game the smart way.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score, which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight, we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats Football History and its Memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats Publishing and Broadcasting Network, in conjunction with Swick Enterprises. And we're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats Magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America which focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We'll cover 150-plus years of football history and memorabilia. Now you can find us on the web at GridironGreatsMagazine.com. At this time, I'd like to introduce my co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats Magazine, a football memorabilia historian specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Largent.
Yeah.
He hails from Portland, Oregon, Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show this evening.
Captain, so good to be here as usual.
It's good to be back with another show here in the lazy, crazy days of summer.
Yeah.
And what's better during the summer than auctions of unopened material? And I'm going to hand it off to you, Joe.
just some really good auctions coming up, like you and I were talking about pre-show. And one of the ones that you and I were bantering back and forth was Heritage. I don't know what Heritage deal is, but they constantly have really good auctions that end like every couple weeks. But Heritage had on Sunday a large auction end, a salvo. I call them, they come in waves, so it's a wave because one wave ended on Sunday, another wave ends in 5 days, and another wave about 10 days after that. So it's kind of fascinating. But they had a wave end and just an abundance of unopened wax packs, cello packs, rack packs, etc., and from all vintage years. But the interesting thing about it is the salvo that closed on Sunday was all GAI packs. So it's pretty interesting. The salvo that ends this Sunday is mostly PSA packs. So it was just kind of interesting.
Why do you think they separated it?
I don't know.
If there's
who knows? I mean, and you and I have talked about this on the show before. At a national, I gave you, it's well known in the show. One of the first sets you opened was 65 tops, so 65 Philly. So at a national once, I gave you a GAI 65 Philly pack to open, and you found.
Yep. I found cards that were touched. I found cards that no way possible they would be in a pack like that. I found, it was a resealed pack. That's and there was not even a
pointed out. Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't even a correct insert in the pack. So I'm saying to myself, what the heck is this? And unfortunately, it was a GAI graded pack. And I don't trust them, to be honest with you.
Yep, and ever since that day, I mean, and GAI obviously, went away and stopped grading packs. So now PSA, Steve Hart, previous guest of the show, Steve Hart, BBCE, is the, like it or not, the preeminent expert on packs. He's pretty well renowned, and I trust his judgment. But it is kind of interesting. The auction coming up is mostly PSA. You've got, and so here's the fascinating one. There was a 1958 Topps cello, GAI 7.5, that sold for $3,100. That includes the VIG, so it's $2,600 plus the VIG. A cello pack for 1958 Topps. In a recent auction, I bought a raw, ungraded 58 Topps complete set, including a really nice Jim Brown. It had a little bit of a sticker on the back, but I was able to take that off. I bought it for about $1,200. So somebody paid 3 times for a cello pack what I did for the entire set with a Jim Brown in it. So $3,200 for a cello pack. I beg your pardon?
That's amazing. I mean, really, putting it in perspective the way you just did, I think that speaks volumes. You're going to pay $3,100 for a cello pack of how many cards compared to $1,200 for getting the complete set. Truly amazing.
Yep.
Truly amazing.
So I mean, obviously, people, it's nostalgic. If for you, probably opening a 65 Topps pack or a 65 Philly pack would be more nostalgic than me handing you a completed set or a stack of cards. I mean,
for sure.
For sure. Ushers you back to your childhood. A young mustachioed, Bob Swick opening up 65 Topps wax packs. When I think about you as a kid opening football, I always imagine you with a mustache, of course.
At that national, Brenda had to console me because I was very upset going back to the room. Because she said, "Did you really open those packs?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's one of the first packs I ever opened in my life, 1965. I opened a Philly pack first, and then I opened the Topps pack second. I still remember. And, it's just sad because, sad, and it's wrong, that, how can you grade something and be that off on it, knowing that it's a resealed pack? That's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous.
I think you just answered the age-old question, why did GAI pack grading go away?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So
in
12 days. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say. I mean, there is a strong reason why they went out of business. I mean, it's a classic reason. What were they grading? Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows what they're looking at? I mean, but in 12 days, a 58 tops cello graded PSA 6 is for sale. So it'll be interesting to see if, PSA 7.5, PSA 6 on cello is virtually the same. What'll be interesting to see is if a PSA graded cello sells for more or less than a GAI 58 top cello. Pretty interesting.
My gut feeling, it'll sell for a lot more. It'll sell for a lot more. It's GAI is GAI. A cello's tough to reseal though, as compared to a wax pack, obviously.
Yeah.
But I can almost guarantee you, whoever got that 58 cello pack's probably going to break it and send it to PSA, get whatever they can get out of it, and try to make money one way or the other.
So in 5 days there's a 58 top cello PSA 7 that sells, and in 12 days there's a PSA 6 58 top cello that sells. So we get 2 bites at the apple here to see, but just an impressive thing of unopened. Including one thing that I was hoping I'd be able to get that I had to slip and let go. It was a 22 rack packs from 1979 Topps football, and each rack pack contains 3 wax packs. So 22 rack packs equals 66 packs, and it sold for $1,850, which is $2,200 with the VIG. So 2,200 divided by 66 is about $35 a pack for 79 Topps football.
Wow!
Obviously, the chase card in that is the Steve Largent card, where he's running down the field, full view, turning slightly into the camera. Good picture. I think and then in 12 days, another 22 rack pack of 79 Topps comes up. So a lot of dupes that they did a really good job of, not putting in the same auction, but staggering out. And Jeff Payne told me that anytime I mention a card in the show, it means I'm after it, and I will end up getting it. So also worth mentioning a 1933 Sports King Jim Thorpe PSA 9, currently going for $35,000. Not really my price range, but I thought I'd mention it just to see if that stroke of luck continues my way. So.
Wow! Unbelievable, truly unbelievable.
Yeah.
I look back, and I've sold off virtually all my older wax that I had, and basically I had wax packs from roughly 74 up. Obviously, I had a few wax boxes here and there. I had complete wax boxes of 82, 83, 84 through 88. I had wax packs from 74 up. I'm going through my notes right now. And over the course of years, and course of several nationals and local shows here, I sold it all because I didn't want to collect it anymore. I enjoyed collecting the wrapper run until I sold it. But I always thought the wax would hold some value to it. And again, I go back to what I call the $5 box with the black line through it. Topps would return, dealers would return, and stores, 5 and 10 stores would return their wax boxes to Topps. Topps would put a big black marker through it, and then they would resell them for $5 a box. So a lot of different larger dealers over the years would buy it up, or it would make its way through the market. And it's truly amazing to see how that market developed over the years, and how there's such a great demand for wax packs, rack packs, so on and so forth. And again, I could see it because how many of those packs are still around, so on and so forth, supply and demand. I still remember at one of the nationals, I broke open a 76 Topps pack that I had, and it was all commons. It was just completely all commons, not one star card in it. And I vaguely remember then opening up 76 wax, and I don't have any recollection, and I went through my notes again. I did not remember ever pulling a painting out of a wax pack, and it was years later I finished that 70. I finished the 76 set like in the early 80s, and the painting card obviously was very reasonable at the time, but I don't ever remember pulling a painting out. So interesting, to say the least. But again, wax packs.
Somebody pointed out, you think about how much wax is worth. Somebody pointed out that an '89 score, wax box was $1,000 now. And it's a beautiful set.
But it's
a
the wax
beautiful
pack
set.
really
There's a lot of star power in there, a lot of rookie cards. So it got me wondering, because I sold off most of my wax, most of my unopened, after we had a couple guests on, a couple unopened experts on. I went down, but I still have quite a few, and most of the ones I saved were some BBC sealed ones. Mm-hmm. I went and I rummaged. I'm like, hey, I have a BBC sealed '89 score wax box. I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I kept kind of rummaging. I've got an 82 tops, an 83 tops, a couple 87, a couple 88s. And then I found in like 2008 to 2009, they came out with a bunch of throwback sets. One of them was the Mayo. So they in 2008, 2009, they did a Mayo throwback set, which was really cool. And the same year, they did a 35 Chickle throwback set, for modern players. And it was, and I remember getting 3 boxes of them. I opened one and put the other 2 away. So I found those 2 boxes. So I don't know how many people put those sets together, but I've got some unopened if anyone wants.
And you heard it first.
Yeah.
Just give us a call.
So speaking of that, 33 Sports King, Thorpe, it goes to show you, just PSA 9. I don't know what the population of that is, but it's $36,000 right now plus the buyer's premium. So you're talking about a $43,000 card, and just goes to show you still the registry is a hell of a drug.
Truly unbelievable. Truly unbelievable. The one thing I see here locally, there was a couple. I was helping an older collector with his collection with the family, getting rid of stuff, so on and so forth. And I was just shocked. They had like a big storage bin, not storage bin, one of those like plastic container bins that you can store stuff in. And he had it filled to capacity with wax. But it was 90, 91 score football, 90, 91 tops football, and a bunch of 90 Pro Set. It wasn't even 91 Pro Set Series 1 that has the Belichick in it. So I said, you're lucky you're going to get $5 a box for each one of these. And that they basically proceeded to sell it to a local dealer here for $5 a box, which he was generous with, because I really don't see how he's going to make more than $6 a box, selling them, making $1 a box type of thing. So very interesting. Very interesting, to say the least. But,
somebody needs to do an article in Gridiron Greats about the stock market versus unopened wax, and just if you would have invested in wax at any given year, what's the value of that?
Yeah. It's just mind-boggling, truly mind-boggling. To basically just thinking about how many wax packs and how many wax boxes over the years passed through my hands, and it's just incredible. I can remember distinctly 1986 Topps football from a candy wholesaler was $10.80 a box. That's what you paid them, and then you put it out for 50 cents a pack, so you made $7 a box type of thing, and then some dealers would hit you up. And you sell the box for $15. You knew you made $4 on it, type of thing. That's the kind of profit margin that was being looked at back then. You know what I mean? Today, to me, it's just hundreds of thousands of dollars more than it ever was 25, 30 years ago. It's just incredible. It's really incredible to think about. It's amazing. All right, our special guest is here, and I'd like to move on in the show and introduce him. Our special guest tonight is Timothy P. Brown, who's the author of How Football Became Football and Fields of Friendly Strife. Tim combines years of research experience and the insight of a former college football coach to eliminate football's past and its relevance to the modern game. He was a guest on our show a couple years back, and I'd like to reintroduce Tim Brown to the show tonight. Tim, thanks for being on.
Hey guys, happy to be back. Had a blast the last time, so hopefully do the same again tonight.
Fingers crossed, my friend.
And I'm gonna give the book an immediate plug. I'm doing a review in the newest issue of Gridiron Greats, which is going to be out at the end of the month. You wrote a brand new book, which was called How Football Became Football, 150 Years of the Game's Evolution. And I'm going to lead off our questions tonight by asking you, how did you come up with the idea to write this book?
Yeah, so I assume all of your readers remember everything I said the last time that I was on your show. And so, but it really starts there. You know, I wrote the first book that I wrote concerned the World War I Rose Bowls that were played by military teams, and in describing what happened in their games and just the nature of football at the time, part of what I had to do is I had to understand what the game was like back then, and just found that there were a lot of things that the nature of football during the time of World War I is quite different than it is today. So I just had to become familiar with it enough to describe it to the reading audience. So things like there were still a lot of restrictions on the forward pass. The game still had this process called punt outs. There were lots of strange techniques for holding, field goals and extra points. And then, the offenses were like traditional T, single wings, and Notre Dame box. So in any event, as in writing that book, I enjoyed finding out about those things. And then some of the feedback I got from readers was that they enjoyed that part of it too. Maybe not the rest of it, but they enjoyed that part of it. And so it just became, it was the thing where I saw that there was an opportunity to write another book really about the broader history of the game, and not some histories of football I think it's just plain boring. I was trying to tell how the game evolved in terms of just some of the nuts and bolts of the game itself, but also fan behavior, stadiums, the equipment, all those kinds of things. So it just seemed like a fun topic to pursue.
The way you broke it down, and for a listening audience who hasn't read the book, I truly recommend it because it is so informative, and I really enjoyed the way you broke down the book section, the three basic sections of the history of the game. And for football, and just to try to relate it to football cards and memorabilia, I've always said there were three eras of football cards. There was the pre-World War II era, and then you had the 1946 to 1988 era, and then you had the modern day era, which is 1989 up, which is just a total proliferation of hundreds of thousands of cards coming out into the market. So the way you broke the book down as far as section by section was, to me, probably one of the most informative aspects of the book. And I'm going to put you on the spot, and I want you to touch upon the three eras, if you can, for our audience.
Sure. So as I was gathering information, I just recognized that somehow I had to find a way to discuss football topically, but also follow some kind of chronology because it changed so much over the years. So what I did was I basically broke football into three eras. So from its beginning until 1905, 1906 until 1959, and then 59 forward. And, the 1905 break was real straightforward. The 1961, you can argue 5 years either way. But I laid out in the book why I made that decision. And then within each of those eras, I basically followed a pattern of the first the same 6-chapter sequence in each era. So there's kind of setting the ground or setting the stage for what's happening. Then there's a chapter on the field, the ball, and stadium, so kind of the physical aspect of the game, or physical environment. A third chapter on play and techniques, a fourth on player equipment and uniforms, a fifth looking at the role of coaches and officials, and then the sixth looked more at what happened off the field. So bands and cheerleaders and fan behavior, but also the broader structure, the NCAA, the various professional leagues. So how the game was organized, beyond starting with conferences, but then the broader NCAA organization, et cetera. So that's the general structure of the book, and I think it worked, and I'm glad it worked too.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me it was just an amazing breakdown, and it was so logical the way you broke it down. And I really never. I've read, I don't know, thousands of football books in my lifetime, and reading any history of a game is always difficult to write for the simple reason: how do you begin with it, and how do you end it at the same time? So the Martin era, I think we're all pretty well versed one way or the other. We lived it, we see it. You had a lot of very interesting tidbits, but the first section, the actual history of the game, was just incredible to read. I mean, you really wrote the history of what happened in that first section. So I definitely got a compliment on that, because you basically put it in understandable terms, even for someone who's not a football fan or doesn't collect football would understand what was going on in that era. So I really give you credit for writing it that way.
Yeah, thanks. One of my primary editors was my daughter, and she's never played the game. But so again, some of it had to make sense for her. So that was a good audience test.
My wife has a journalism degree from University of Oregon. Whenever I ask her to edit my articles I write, she puts too much red ink on them, so I stopped asking her a long time ago. First of all, I was checking this book out, Tim. Very handsome profile picture on the backside of the book. Good-looking man.
Yeah.
But
I was born with it. It was a gift.
The description of it is what caught me. I printed out because I thought it was a nod to quite a few things. Just richly illustrated, written in a fun, engaging manner. Readers learn why maul-ins, punt-outs, and quarterback kicks disappeared from the game. I had to look two of those up, and I consider myself to be a pretty good fan. As well as how helmets, end zones, hash marks, penalty flags became part of football. Walter Camp, Paul Brown, Sid Gilman received their due while revealing the roles played by Frank Versch, John Lochnery, and other lesser-known men who impacted the game. A thoroughly researched and humorous look at how football became the game we know and love today. I thought that was such a well-written, intro to the book. Something like that is, something that I'd throw on a Word doc and then, add and alter, every other day for months. I mean, how long does it take you to research and write a book, something like this? I mean, it's just, I know my writing style. I'm always curious of other people's.
Yeah. Well, so it basically took me about 26 months. Most of that was really full time, spent on the book. I was working off and on during that period, but basically, I finished the first book, set up a website, and did some publicity work on that, and then kind of went right into this, into the second, into how football became football. So I just kind of pounded at it for a long time, and the hardest thing was really knowing when to stop. And it's one of those things where, it was just how far do I go? How much more do I need to find out and confirm?
Yeah, I've done that too, where I'm like, I'm digging too deep, et cetera. But I looked up this book. I looked up some of the details on Amazon as well. It's 434 pages, 1.6 pounds. So at 26 months, it's 780 days, and at 434 pages, you're averaging 0.56 pages per day. Does that seem about right?
Yeah, well, some of them I probably wrote 5 or 6 times, but
yeah.
And at one point, it was substantially longer, and then I just edited it down. I just, when you start writing these things, you get too focused on things that this minutia that you find interesting, but you just have to get rid of. And so I did have an editorial review by a professional editor, and like you did with the first book, you said you got to get rid of some of this stuff. So so you chop, and I probably chopped about 20% out of it.
Okay. Wow. So 20% would have weighed in at about 2 pounds if you hadn't asked your editor. Good. Bob had mentioned, the pictures in there, and I just none of the reviews that I was able to read had pictures. So I'm very curious I look forward to buying a copy and checking out the pictures, because the front picture, anyways. Yeah, it's a good-looking book.
Yeah.
Well,
that's studio. I hired a cover designer, so kudos to him.
Now, while Joe brought up the pictures, again, going a little off script, that was a incredible task to obtain pictures, especially the early ones that are in the first 2 halves, first 2 sections areas of the book. Give us a little background of what you had to do to obtain them, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so the book has 203 illustrations or images, and probably, I'm guessing 170 of those are pictures, images rather than illustrations. And so basically the task was, especially for the early days, a lot of times I can explain and write, and it's still hard to visualize what you're talking about. Wherever I could, I tried to find images that could at least provide a sense of what the game was like and how things worked. So, just as a real simple example, there's an image in there that shows how sinners snapped the ball. There's several images like that. And so initially they snapped the ball with their feet, because it was a game. It was rugby. It wasn't football yet. It was rugby. And so just like in the rugby scrum, they're kicking the ball back with their feet. That's what they were doing in football. And then they finally started snapping with their hands. But even then, they were rolling the ball to the quarterback on the ball side. Not, they weren't snapping it nose to nose. They were rolling it along the ground on the side. So, anyways, I was able to find images, or in some cases, ink drawings that were very common in newspapers back then, and to provide those as illustrations. So most of those images I either found in old, period books and magazines that are out of copyright, so I could use them without, penalty or having to pay for anything. And then in many, many cases, and I cite them all in the book, a lot of the universities that were playing back then, so, the Harvards and Yales and Princetons and those kinds of folks, Michigan, I sourced a number of photos from them. So by and large, it's university archives. In the case of the equipment, I got a fair number of the images from old sporting good catalogs that I bought. And then, beyond that, I purchased a fair number of the RPPCs, the real photo postcards, that were just, that became common around the turn of the century. And so, for turn of the century forward, I was able to illustrate some of the concepts using those.
Yeah, the RP, the real
RPPCs,
postcards, are very to me, historical, and I think they're, to a certain degree, they're still overlooked in the hobby for whatever reason, and I think a lot of it is it's difficult when you buy a postcard and you have no way of identifying the player or the teams on the postcard. So I know for a fact, a lot of collectors just don't like it because of that. To me, it was always interesting picking up a postcard and, you know, trying to trace it, trying to find it, try to see if I can match that player's face or the school, so on and so forth. So that, to me, really added a lot in that section at the same time. So that was really nice to see. And for a person who enjoys memorabilia and anybody who does like memorabilia, the book, to me, does a phenomenal job with your photos that you use to illustrate a lot of your points and what you were writing about. So that was very, very interesting. And actually, fill me in. What's the year of that the copyright stops for items?
Yeah.
I forgot what it was off the top of my head.
Yeah, so it's basically right now items that were from I can't remember right now if it's 1923 or 1924 this year, and then it marches forward when the calendar turns, it marches forward a year. So it's right in that time frame.
Okay. And that's a big help for a lot of individuals who are writing about older materials, older subjects, so on and so forth, especially in sports.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those pictures are, beyond rare type of situation. Now, while you were writing this book, do you have any interesting stories that you could share with our audience in your expedition of the book itself?
Yeah, so I think one of my favorite stories, and it was Joe mentioned it. Reading the little synopsis at the back on the back cover of the book, he mentioned a guy named John Lockney, and so nobody knows who John Lockney is, but he had a greater impact on the way well, let me put it this way. When you think about the lines on a football field, all the individual lines, he is responsible for, I think it's 78% of them. And specifically what he's responsible for is you think about, you've got sidelines, the yard lines, the end line, the goal line, and then we've got hash marks that came into the game in 1932. But the hash marks are just the lines that intersect and are perpendicular to the yard lines. But football fields now also have all those little 1 yard line stripes that run parallel to the yard lines, and they're like at the 21, the 22, da-da-da-da. So Lockney is a guy who was just a normal fan. You got a guy living in Wisconsin. He always got frustrated that the referees often didn't spot the ball correctly. And back before his lines came into the game, they were always pulling the chains out to measure. And so he had the idea of adding these other lines onto the field. So again, all those lines that are in the hash mark area and then along the sidelines, those are Lockney lines. Now, nobody calls them that. There was really no name for them. I'm actually trying to get a process going to get people to start calling them Lockney lines. But so all those individual lines, he was just a normal fan who got his local high school to add them, and people liked them. He then got the University of Wisconsin to add them, and it just so happened they added them before a nationally televised game with Rice, and they had all kinds of people writing in and saying, "Hey, these things are great. Why doesn't everybody put those lines on the field?" Because it just made it clear, the forward progress and all those kinds of things. And really within, I think it was 16 months of his idea to add these lines, the NCAA required them on football fields moving forward. So, it's just a great story of just an average guy adding to the game. Now, go ahead.
Wasn't even a coach, just a fan who said, "Let's do this."
Yep.
Interesting.
And then for Joe, just for Joe, I was going to add in one of the other things I just love. There's a lot of things that, you've seen through your whole life, and you never knew what they were. You never knew what you called them.
Yep.
But everybody knows the Red Grange photo. I think it was 1925 photo of him wearing a jersey when he first joined the Bears, and it was one of those jerseys that had those silly looking stripes running vertically on his jersey, right? And so those are called friction strips. Sometimes people call them stickum cloth, but they were typically moleskin or sometimes canvas, but they were intended for the runner or the ball carrier it was supposed to help him hold the ball better and retain, so it didn't slip out of his jersey. Now, I had gone 60 years before I knew that they were called friction strips. I'd always seen those things, but didn't know what they were called.
We learned it about a year ago. We had a guest on who's in Seattle who makes jerseys, authentic period jerseys. He mentioned finding that friction tape was the hardest part.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me when you wrote about that in the book, and again, Joe's referring to Ebbets Field. We had the owner and creator of that on. And I said to myself, in football, as years went on, and I know it was very common in the 50s and 60s, a lot of players would use almost like a tack, or I don't know what word I'm trying to use, like a tack or a grease for their hands, and stick them and so they could hold the ball, especially the running backs, and they would tape up their wrist or whatever and just try to touch it before the play, so when they got the handoff, they could hold the ball better. But then after a while, the center had to make sure he didn't get the ball stuck while he was snapping it to the quarterback. So he had to make sure wherever it was touched, he would have to roll that ball over, or make it so that it wouldn't stick, type of thing. So that's very interesting. And again, we didn't realize until about a year ago when he was on the show. I had never heard of that up until that point. So that's very interesting to know and to learn about at the same time.
Yeah, but you've seen those things forever, right? You just didn't know what they were called.
If you look at team photos, only the backs have friction tape, because I always thought it was part of the uniform. But then you look at the other players and you realize only the backs, only the people who are carrying the ball have the friction tape. It starts to make a little more sense.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that was the case initially, but then a lot of them, pretty much everybody had them, and they got all. I've got a picture in there of. I'm almost positive it's Furman. That instead of having stripes, they had. It looks like a target, an archery target. In there, that's what they had on the front of their jerseys. So, people had all kinds of different, shapes and. It became as much a style issue as it was, the functional value.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a very good writer. So I have a particular format I have to stick to. So I always am impressed and just tip my hat to people who can sit down and crank out, such an amazing book like this. 1.6 pounds of stuff. Like I said, it's incredible. What's the difference between how your writing style from your first book, Fields of Friendly Strife, and this book? It was a different approach, just a different layout. What's different?
I don't know that the writing style itself was that different. I think I was a better writer in the second one. I edited a lot more, and I think it's tighter. I think the research is what was different. In the first book, it was kind of, the primary task I had in the first book was that I was trying to profile these military teams, and unlike universities where the universities kept playing, and so they kept a record of who was on the teams back in the old days. the military training camps of World War I, half of them disappeared. So there wasn't an ongoing archive or group of people who were documenting who these people were. So the task there was much more about trying to identify who some of the players were and where they came from and what happened to them after the war. And so that was it was kind of like once I did that, okay, then the research was over. Whereas with this one, a lot of what I was trying to do was to try to identify when was the first time that certain things came into the game. And you can always argue that, okay, well, this was an earlier influence and this was an earlier influence. And so it's kind of, how far do you go with that? The other challenge here was that, so if you did a I relied a lot on newspaper archives, online databases, newspaper archives. And so if you wanted to figure out, okay, well, when did blocking sleds come into the game? If you search blocking sled, if you search for blocking sled,
it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's well, you'll find it. The newspaper first mentioned blocking sleds in the 1920s, but if you go all the way back to 1890. They had these things called charging machines. And they were the same, basically the same thing as blocking sleds. They were just calling them something different. So, that was one of the difficulties here. And I'm sure there's places where I think I found the first instance, but there's probably somebody before what I identified. And hopefully, somebody comes up and can identify those things. But so just the terminology changed so much over the years. And I deliberately put the original rules that the Intercollegiate Football Association laid down in 1878. I put those rules in the appendix of the book just so people can read that and try to understand what the heck are they talking about, because the language is very different, the terminology is very different. And it was, a bunch of times I had to find source after source in order to even figure out what they meant, because, it's not documented anymore. Like, I mentioned punt outs earlier. Nobody knows what those are anymore.
Yeah.
And so, I just had to go back to period sources and try to figure out best I could what that meant and what it was about.
Exactly. Unbelievable. Tim, do you collect any football memorabilia?
Yeah, so my primary collection is Rose Bowl tickets and then the ribbons that were worn by officials, ushers, people working inside the stadium. And the problem is, I suspect I've got one of the best collections of Rose Bowl tickets around. But I just can't find anymore, or I can't afford the ones that I can find. And so I started in writing my first book, I started doing a little bit more collecting of military team ephemera, mostly images, but programs and things like that. And then in large part, due to how football became football, most of what I'm acquiring, probably over the past 2 years, has been images, and the vast majority of those are RPPCs. So most of what, even among those, most of what I'm trying to find are, it's not necessarily, hey, here's the 1908 Missouri team. It's, I want to find an image of the Missouri team playing on the field, an action shot, and where it kind of shows something about the game. So it's more about the concept or what's happening in the game, or what the stadium looked like at the time, rather than necessarily a particular team or particular players. It's more the images that illustrate a football concept. Now that may seem kind of bizarre, but that's kind of where I'm at.
That the photo on the front cover of Jim Thorpe, I don't think I've seen that image before. Where did you find that one?
Library of Congress. So and actually, I got to give credit to the cover designer, a guy named Stuart Williams, who does really great work. I went to him with a different image, and he said, "Yeah, it's not going to work." But the funny thing is that the image I gave to him was taken the same day, at the same place, the same game, by the same photographers as the Jim Thorpe image that he used. So photographer's name Harrison Ewing. Yeah, and so and his image is 10 times better than the one that I gave him. Because number one, it's Jim Thorpe, so it's just so so perfect, and it's just a beautiful image. Beautiful image.
Yeah, I love it. So obviously that one's past. Where it's what do you call it? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Fascinating. Good.
Yeah, so Library of Congress. I mean, if somebody wants to spend waste a couple hours some evening, go out to get on the web and Library of Congress, and just search for images and just put in the word football, and you'll get page after page after page.
Oh yeah.
University of Michigan has a Bentley library that similarly just page after page of images, just wonderful resources.
So second book, Tim. I'm glad you're going to take a little time off, dust yourself off, take a breather, and then start thinking about that third book. I wanted to plant an idea about a young receiver out of Oklahoma, played for the Seattle Seahawks, wore number 80. I think your fans, I think the public deserves a deep down dive on Steve Largent. What do you think?
What was his name again?
So much for being invited on the third time.
Well, John, I tell you what,
that's probably in all the years we've been doing the show was the best Largent hit that you did ever. That was phenomenal.
So I would say it's far more likely that I write about Red Grange, but I know there's been other books written about him. So it's just like, to me, by the time they started putting face masks on, it's just not as fun. Yeah, so I don't know. Right now, I don't know that I have a third book in the offing. It takes so much time, and really requires a passion. And if I was betting, I would think that maybe putting something together that is a little bit less text and more just images. So just images of football past, and trying to a lot of these RPPCs were just taken, just average stuff, high schools, just local commercial photographers and yearbook photographers. That's who produced a lot of those. And most of them are just hidden, or they're lost. So to the extent that I can find some of them and resurface them and make them available, that's great. Some of them are on my website too, right now. But anyways, just books can be more accessible in many ways than the web. So
yeah. I think that would be very well received, to say the least, if you came up with something like that. I know a lot of collectors would love to see that. All right, Tim, we're wrapping up the show. We're almost out of time. Any final thoughts and or advice for collectors or writers, and can you give us information on how we can purchase your book?
Yeah, so I think I'm not going to provide any advice to writers because they're my competition, so they're on their own. But to collectors, I think I kind of have to break them into two groups. So the people who primarily collect cards and other items that were kind of designed to be collected, right, or produced to be collected. I think how football became football can be helpful to them but more like to the general fan, just in terms of, if you spend as much time and money on collecting football cards and related items as both of you and many of your listeners do, then the book really is just a way to help you get a better handle on the game, just understand how it got to where it is today. Because it's been a long and torturous, path. To people who are maybe a little bit more like me, who collect, and I'm using the term very broadly, but ephemera, images, programs, equipment, those kinds of items. I think there's enough stuff in this book that can really help people date items. So, to be able to look at an item and say, number one, identify that it is football related, because some things that, the old nose guards, most people would have no idea what those are. And I don't mean nose guards, the position, the defensive tackle type folks. Right. So to be able to identify, date, and then have a sense of how those different, pieces of equipment, et cetera, were used. So I think that those kinds of collectors, I think, would benefit, I think, to be smarter collectors, if they read the book. And I guarantee you that I don't care who you are, there's dozens of things that in this book that you will not have come across before.
Right.
There's just lots of
I had to look a few
things
things up.
So, and again, hopefully it's written in a fairly fun manner, poke fun at, particularly at the University of Michigan. I live in Michigan, and I'm a Wisconsin fan, so I got to make fun of Michigan wherever I can, and so I do that a few times, and poke fun at a couple other schools as well.
That's great. I do have to say this time, I highly recommend the book. You'll see the review will be coming out in a few weeks, and again, it's a must-read for both football fans and non-fans alike. Mm-hmm. And where can we get the book again?
Yeah, so it's sold on Amazon. So if you just look up how football became football, or type in my name, Timothy P. Brown, you'll find it there. And then for those who want to get a feel for it without necessarily buying, you can go to my website, fieldsofriendlystrife.com, and I've got a number of articles in there that are under a subject line of how football became football, but there's a whole bunch of little blog postings that are basically on football history topics. So go there and get a feel for it. If you like the stuff, then go get the book. If you don't like it, then you haven't wasted any of your money.
Very good. I don't think it's a waste.
Tim,
I think it's a good read.
Tim, I thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. Tim Brown, author of the new book, How Football Became Football, 150 Years of the Game's Evolution. I highly recommend it. All right, Joe, I'm going to hand off to you. We're running out of time. We're going to go in our 2-minute warning and wrap up.
Yeah, Tim. Oh, I thought you had something to say. I was going to say, Bob says thank you for being on the show, and I say thank you for considering writing a Steve Largent book. Thank you. Thank you for being on the show.
And I do want to say, I don't know if you remember these. On Saturday Night Live, they've done this thing where if you appear 5 times on Saturday Night Live, you get invited as the host. You get invited to the special club. So I've got to write 3 more books. I got to write 3 more books.
That's the
I'm
attitude. On it. I don't think we've had any 5-timers, Tim, so you're in the running. You're doing good.
Yeah.
Well, you're up 2.
But hey, thank you.
Next
been a blast.
book will be 3, so you'll be all set.
Nice. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks for being on.
My pleasure. Thanks,
Joe,
guys.
Joe, hand off to you.
All right. That's fun. I remember talking to him the first time. I had to go back and look at my notes. it's always good to make sure somebody has a sense of humor before you start dropping some jokes. Good auctions coming up. Looking forward to Leland's. It pops July 19th, which I think is this Sunday. It'll be good to see if we can get him back on as a guest to talk about items coming up. Be good to get him a week prior, just to drop a few, give us some hints of some things coming up. We should kick that around in the future, Bob.
I hear you. And he was amazing the first time we had him on. A couple
we could have
things.
talked for hours.
All right, wrapping up. We're down to a minute. Couple quick things. Again, new issue of GG will be out the end of July. Traditionally, the national issue, obviously no national this year, so it's going to be a regular issue. A lot of articles, including Joe's article on the 1988, and I'll just leave it like that. Keep people in suspense. We're going to be back this week with another show on Thursday with a special guest with an incredible collection of a NFL team, and I'll leave that as it is. Joe, back to you. 20-second wrap-up, real quick. Any final thoughts?
Wow. I'm sure it's a page-turner. My 1988 to-be-determined article in Gridiron Greats will be a page-turner. You'll love it. Some fun little quips in there that I always like to drop. So, Bob,
I'll tell you, that brought back a lot of memories for me. I did collect that set, and it was nice to read about again. It was a very interesting set, and to me, it's very overlooked. All right, we're almost out of time. If you're not a subscriber, what's stopping you? Check us out, GridironGreatsMagazine.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in a few days.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.